Monica twitched on the couch, trying to force her body to obey. She rubbed once more at her red eyes as she tried to locate the bottle of water she swore she had gotten last time she'd woken up. But it was nowhere to be seen. With one last desperate lunge, Monica managed to sit upright. She gasped in pain as her stomach clenched, almost as if, on its own volition, one of her arms located the bottle buried within the couch, and she triumphantly pulled it out. An empty bottle of Jack Daniels. Disgusted, Monica tossed it aside as her stomach clenched again in response. Since she had left Sunshine Valley, most days had been like this. She had cut herself off from her few remaining friends, and her family had given up on her before any of this mess had even began. She lived alone in a house she had bought long ago during her brief time as a celebrity. She'd also managed to make enough money and, unlike the rest of her former band, managed to spend it wisely. It would be a while before she had to worry about such things again. In a lot of ways, she had realized after her return, this is what kept her from re-engaging with others in a normal life again. So she had tried a not-so-normal life. During her brief moments of sobriety, she had attempted to help Sam and the others by studying up on Salado. But studying had never been her strong suit, and she had quickly given up on that. She had never been able to admit to herself, but she hoped the phone Victor had given her would ring. It was now sitting amid the clutter on her coffee table, and it never made a sound. She managed to pull herself off the couch and make it to the bathroom, where she spent most of the day. Eventually, she emerged, freshly showered and with a plan. If she stayed here much longer, she'd wind up dead in a gutter somewhere. So she'd given herself two choices. She could attempt to repair her relationships with her friends and family, maybe even pick up a guitar again. Try to put her life back together. Or she could return to the madness of Sunshine Valley. Monica quickly went to her room and began packing her things. She wasn't sure what she could bring that would be much help in hell, but she'd at least have a change of clothes. Hell wasn't exactly what they expected it to be. Sam, Dexter, and Tim had just stepped out from the portal to hell, an office building much like the one in Sunshine Valley, and were looking at their surroundings. After their meeting with Decker, they had been given packs containing food and water, and then brought to the basement of the strange office building near the mayor's office. Manstrong had produced a device similar to what they had stolen from the warehouse and pressed a few buttons. The world shifted under their feet as if the basement was a car that had just been slammed into. It only lasted a second, but when it was over, Manstrong was gone and they were in yet another basement. But this basement was different. Instead of the boring white walls and fluorescent lighting, the walls and ceiling were black and cracked, and the lights were strange globe-like objects that appeared to hold some sort of glowing liquid. The walls and ceiling were black and cracked, and the lights were strange. Dexter had poked at one of them, and it had hurriedly floated away from his prodding finger. They had made their way out of the place, not pausing to look around. Decker had warned them it was dangerous to linger. They had then stepped out of the building into a forest. Not exactly what you expected the fiery pits of hell to be like, eh? Dexter asked, nudging Tim. Tim, forgetting he was supposed to be sulking for a moment, looked into the depths before him with wide eyes. Maybe not, but this is better. It's like we're in another world, he said. They couldn't make out much. The trees were spindly and densely packed together with not much light filtering through. The building stood behind them, awkward and huge. Much bigger than it had looked on the inside. It was also tilting slightly, as if it had been thrown together in a hurry. They stood on what looked like moss. It was soft and gave a little when it was stepped on. To Tim, this strange feeling made it seem like the ground could give out at any moment, and he would fall through into nothingness. Dexter, on the other hand, didn't seem to mind, and he was bouncing idly on his feet as he looked around. According to Decker, there was supposed to be someone here waiting for us. He did not seem the least bit interested in their surroundings. Well, no use waiting around, Dexter exclaimed. He started forward in a random direction and promptly tripped over a green vine-like object on the ground. In response to being kicked, the vine moved and rose from the ground. It then whipped Dexter along the face with its tail end. He yelped and crawled away, holding his cheek where the vine had cut him. The vine drew back again, preparing to strike. They heard laughter as the vine drew back deeper into the forest. The three humans looked at one another, unsure of what to do. A light flickered in the direction that the vine had disappeared in, and they were able to make out a tattooed face near the ground. Morons, the face hissed. The light grew brighter, and they were able to make out more features of the person. It was a woman, heavily tattooed in an array of colors and completely hairless, but a human woman nonetheless. She smiled at them, showing her wickedly sharpened teeth. Again, the light grew brighter. The woman was sitting cross-legged on the ground, watching them. In her hand, she held one of the globes of light that had been in the building's basement. Her other hand was in her lap, petting the vine that had tripped, then whipped Dexter. She massaged the globe in her hand, and the light grew brighter once more. Satisfied, she tossed it into a lantern and quickly latched it shut before it could escape. The thing hugged the bottom of the lantern and shuddered. The woman stood with the lantern, dropping the vine thing from her lap. The vine snaked up into the trees and disappeared into the heights. Tim made the decision then never to touch a tree in hell. Your Vitrin? Sam asked. The woman stared at Sam, the wicked smile still on her face. She was tall and slender, all sharp angles with large, owlish eyes. For clothing, she wore a strange brown robe that didn't seem to fit her. My name is Vitrin, she said, as if Sam hadn't spoken. Dexter, who had recovered from his fall, stepped forward toward Vitrin with his hand outstretched. Hello, Vitrin, I'm... Vitrin's free hand whipped forward, and one of her sharpened nails caught Dexter right where the vine had cut him on the cheek. Dexter yelped again and backed away with his hand to his face, which was now bleeding. The smile never left Vitrin's face. Next time, you die, she said, beaming at Dexter's pain. She spoke with a very strong lisp that made it sound like she was hissing at them. Despite his dislike of the man, Tim felt sorry for him. Dexter was about to respond, but Sam cut him off before he could anger Vitrin further. Mayor Stack said you would guide us to Titus, and we were not to be harmed. You touch him or threaten us again, we'll find our own way. He waved his gun meaningfully at Vitrin, which he had kept hidden until this moment. Vitrin eyed the gun. Tim wondered if she had ever seen one before. According to Decker Stack, Vitrin was a hell baby, like them. But unlike the others, she had refused to ever go to Earth. So Thomas had let her stay as Decker's contact in hell. Other demons had not been happy that a human had made hell her home. She had quickly made a name for herself by escaping demons that would do her harm, as well as making them pay for it in clever and painful ways. Eventually, they either forgot about her or gave up. Her eyes shifted from Sam's gun to Tim. He felt himself tense up and begin to sweat a little. He wasn't good with confrontations. Vitrin gave Tim a wink and then turned her back on them, making her way through the trees. Follow me, she said, and stay in the light if you want to live. They silently followed Vitrin for a while through hell. Even Dexter seemed to be subdued, rubbing his injured cheek as he inspected their surroundings. Once they had left the building behind, hell took on a maze-like quality. The trees were unending and only seemed to get denser the deeper they went. The path they were following would often dead end into a group of trees so close to be impassable. There were no other structures either. They were only a couple of hours in so far, but if it weren't for Vitrin, they would have been lost long ago. A disturbing fact, as Vitrin seemed to make little effort to make sure they kept up. She prowled around with the lantern high above her head. Despite her height, she walked close to the ground, almost as if she were used to crawling around on all fours. This wouldn't have surprised Tim one bit if it were true. Sometimes she would go completely still and cock her head to the side, listening for something. But as far as Tim could tell, there was nothing anywhere nearby. The forest was completely silent, which was somehow worse. Finally, Tim had gathered enough confidence to speak. "Where is everything?" he asked. Vitrin didn't stop moving, but she answered him anyway. "Demons do not like the area, whereas Hell's children are kept. Don't worry. I'm sure you will see plenty before we retrieve dear Titus." She almost spit the man's name. "You two didn't get along?" Dexter asked. She ignored him. Dexter looked over at Tim and raised his eyebrows. It seemed Vitrin would only speak to Tim. Tim wasn't sure how he felt about that. The globe of light in Vitrin's lantern gave a tiny shudder, and the light dimmed. Vitrin cursed and violently shook the light, but it had no effect. The small group crept closer together. Dexter, who was trying to stay as far away from Vitrin as possible but still remain in the light, bumped up against the skinny tree, which rattled in response. Vitrin looked back at him with a frown on her face and held a finger to her lips. The temperature began to creep upward as they made their way, and the light that had filtered through the tops of the trees had disappeared completely. The entire group was sweating and miserable. That was when the sounds began. A strange hooting sound cut through the dark above, much like the sound an owl makes, but much more high-pitched and erratic. Tim nervously moved closer to Vitrin, and Sam gripped his gun tightly. The hooting sound was joining with others, until it almost sounded like singing. A chorus of owls being strangled. The light globe gave another shudder and dimmed even further. Vitrin paused and looked down at the lantern, then back at the men behind her. "Run," she whispered, as the globe gave its final shudder and died. The light disappeared and the group was pitched into the darkness. Tim was frozen, unable to move. The hooting picked up its pace, and there was a squeal of fury in front of him in the direction where Vitrin had been. Tim heard someone near him take off running as a rush of air swept by his head. He felt something sharp clip his ear, the shock of which spurred him into movement. Tim took off in the direction they had been heading, and a gunshot flashed through the dark. In the brief flash of light, Tim saw a hideously long arm reaching down the tree toward his face. He switched direction just soon enough to avoid the outstretched claw, but lost his sense of direction in doing so. He only made it a few feet more before tripping over a root and plowing headfirst into a tree.